Hello, and welcome to the light. Donald Trump is no longer the problem that we're facing here in the United States. Now, a lot of people would like to focus specifically on him and pretend that he is, but he really isn't anymore. What he's left behind is undeniably much more of a monster than he was or even could be, in my opinion. Now, this is not at all a dismissal of all the horrific things he's done executively as the president with the presidential powers that were awarded to him when he won in 2016. This is to focus on the here and now with, as of today, what is the problem what is the biggest challenge that the country and the left, and in my opinion in the best interest of the right, even though they won't think so, what is the problem of today with all of us? Okay, so number one, I want to start out with possibly the biggest issue, and it has been the biggest issue historically. It will likely be the biggest issue in the future. I don't necessarily know 100% how to get rid of this, but here we go. Propaganda. Now, there's some people who flippantly hear that and they react as if propaganda has never existed. And that really confuses me, like, beyond belief. Like, propaganda has basically defined the better part of the latest century more than ever before, such as the propaganda leading up to World War One, especially the propaganda leading up to and during World War Two. And it's never necessarily stopped after that with all the Red Scare propaganda in the United States, calling everyone a communist, as if, which, by the way, if you cement or if you substitute the words that they spoke, if you take communists out and put in like evil, literally every one of their sentences would still make coherent sense. So they didn't really have that great of a definition of what communism meant. But let's go ahead and start off with the definition of propaganda. Information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. That is the bare bones, straight up definition of propaganda. There's people, first of all, that, and this is the whole point of propaganda, do not know that they're getting propagandized. This is probably the most dangerous type of situation, when somebody is literally getting on purpose misleading information and they think it's the truth. That can lead to very, very dangerous, violent outcomes that otherwise would not have happened had they not been propagandized in a certain way. Another group of people like to pretend that if you use the word propaganda, you're a nutty conspiracy theorist that just doesn't have their foot in reality. Because the government, I don't know if you're qualified to react to what the government does. The government is a big machine, and to say that it is lying to us is a little oversimplified. Okay, you're an absolute fucking moron if you disavow the possibility of propaganda, especially affecting you, affecting me, affecting anyone. You're a moron if you think that that can't happen. You're an even bigger moron if you think it never has happened and doesn't exist, basically. I would say that that's a much bigger moron. And you're also a moron if you have been confronted with absolute, logical, pretty much straight up proof that you're getting propagandized and you continue to deny it. And you continue to promote that propaganda that is affecting you as if it's the one and only truth. You're all morons. That's, I would say, the biggest, maybe not the biggest, but it's among the top three biggest real problems of 2020 and 2021 and going forward, is what I mean. Trump has lost the election. He won't really be around much longer as far as a political force to enact negative things in the world. So the whole premise of this video is kind of on that. Okay, so moving on to a much bigger part of this, of these 2 freaking pages I wrote out, is people's ignorance of political labels. This is a huge problem that can kind of get into the first problem we mentioned, propaganda. When you have absolutely no true understanding of political labels, and first of all, you're throwing them out there on people, and when people mention them, you react a certain way, usually fearfully. Oh God, not socialism. Okay? When you completely lack that understanding, just fundamentally, it's much more easy for you to be propagandized into doing something that you wouldn't even, the before you got propagandized version of yourself, wouldn't have dreamed of doing in a million years. But all of a sudden, you're going to be espousing all these things and fighting for these causes and fighting against others in the name of labels that you just don't even understand. I mean, that's so fucking dangerous. And it's fundamentally, obviously, by definition, ignorant. And there's a willful ignorance that's around today that is really terrifying to me. I mean, it was not necessarily like it's never been around. It's just today's thing. But I live in today. I notice it. I didn't notice it as much when I was more of a kid. I definitely notice it now. People literally walling themselves off to information in a very terrifying way. Walling themselves off, but it's a 2-step process, because they first they wall themselves off from the information, and then they go to an echo chamber on some whatever social media site, pick one. They go to an echo chamber and hear a bunch of people say only this other thing that they want to hear, and that gets reinforced over and over. So you're down a rabbit hole of reinforcing untrue things. What does that do to your thought process, I wonder? Well, let's get into what some of these political labels are, since I have made the claim that so many people don't understand them. So, liberalism. Liberalism. Go ahead and ask yourself if you know what that means. Say what you think it means to yourself. What is liberalism? When I ask you that, what is your answer? Possibly something along the lines of, liberalism is a left-wing, can be far left-wing ideology that involves taking people's money and giving it to other people and taking away guns. That's wrong. Another person's, from a more left-wing perspective, answer on liberalism. Well, liberalism is when you like war and you like, you kind of, you're nice to gay and trans people, but really you're sending them all to the same wars, and you're making them go to the same businesses to work under the oppressive forces of capitalism. Both of those are wrong. Here's what liberalism is: a political and moral philosophy based on liberty, consent of the governed, and equality before the law. Liberals often espouse support for free markets, limited government, civil and human rights, capitalism, democracy, secularism, and etc. That's what liberalism is. Essentially, liberalism is a very hands-off ideology that basically reveres freedom or liberty as much as humanly possible. They want as much liberty as you can get away with while also having a functioning society. That's what liberalism is. That's it. Full stop. Now, there's more there, and that we could go into, but that's literally the main vein of what liberalism is. So, moving on to our next political label, conservatism. Go ahead and, when I ask you, what is conservatism? Answer for yourself. What do you think conservatism is? Now, you might have some sort of response along the lines of, well, fighting for our freedom, duh. Keeping people safe, keeping our values, whatever those mean to you, our values and family and religion. Well, okay, now some of that's true. Let's go over what the left wing would probably say about it. Oh, it's a regressive, wanting to move backwards ideology where you basically support putting certain groups of people down and holding up groups of people who've had power for hundreds of years. And I mean, both of those are kind of true. Like, they have elements of truth in them, but neither are conservatism. Let's look at exactly what conservatism is. Conservatism: commitment to traditional values and ideas with opposition to change or innovation. The central tenets of conservatism include tradition, hierarchy, and authority, including heavy policing, as well as property rights. That's conservatism. So, what's funny is, many people who would call themselves, I'm a conservative, I'm not talking about pundits. A lot of pundits know at least what conservative is. And they also probably know a lot of what liberalism and what we're going to be getting into in a minute, socialism is. They probably know what that is too, but they have to purposely misrepresent it to promote their worldview, to make them seem at all like they sound like they have good ideas. They have to completely misrepresent what liberalism and leftism is. So, but they definitely understand what conservatism is. I'm talking about not the pundits, but average Americans who say, I am a conservative. I would venture to guess that most average Americans that think that they're a conservative are much more of a liberal than a conservative. Because if you'll notice, this conservative definition had nothing to do with the right-wing politicians and pundits dog whistling about freedom. That's liberalism. Conservatism doesn't really give much of a damn about freedom. In fact, it seems to want to constrict and conserve freedom in every way possible. Now, not every way, but many ways, such as the opposition to innovation. I mean, this has been historically true completely, especially in the United States, where every time there was any sort of societal change happening, conservatives were there hot and ready with the mic to tell you why we shouldn't be changing. And then 10, 20 years later, they'll pretend like they were never saying anything like that. And they pretend like, oh, this isn't, obviously we should have done that. And then they will, as they're saying that, say, oh, but this new thing that we're changing, we can't do that. So, I mean, that's not freedom. And there are people, by the way, who openly know what this is and still support it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I bet a lot of people who describe themselves as conservatives are much more of a liberal, which they have demonized that word into meaning God knows what. But the true meaning of the word liberal, a lot of them are probably that, or at least much closer to that than an actual conservative. So, moving on. Now, this one's tricky for a lot of people. And that's not without design. They want it to be very tricky so that they can slip in where they can in society. Fascism. I want you to go ahead and describe, when I ask you, what is fascism? What is your answer? Now, if your answer is broadly Hitler, you're actually pretty close. You're actually almost right on the dot. If your answer is Stalin, you're nowhere near close. Although he did have some fascistic tendencies with his mainly the authoritarian part, but that's not all of what fascism is. So, let's get into what fascism is. Fascism is a form of far-right authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society and the economy. Let's break that down a little bit. Ultranationalism is a big, weird word, okay? What it means is that literally, no matter what, like on the question of the political compass test, like if my country did something wrong, I would still support it, and you hit agree, you're a fascist. You believe that no matter what, it is impossible that America or Germany can do anything wrong, right? We're the best. We are actually, not only are we the best, we're superior to all other nations. Superior, and they should look to us for everything. A fundamentally anti open society in every in every sense of the word. Which open societies are really good because you get a lot of ideas and brain power from different parts of the world who grew up differently, working on central things that can benefit everyone. If you're a fascist, you fucking hate that for very irrational and reactionary reasons. Now, they didn't get into it in this definition, but fascism is also very usually ethno-nationalist as well. Not just ultra-nationalist, but ethno-nationalist. Whatever race it is, pick a race. Okay, if that race in this country is fascist, then they're better than all other races, and all those races need to leave their fucking country because they're ruining it. That's what they believe. And it's very simple. And fascist societies also very rarely flourish. Like, it wasn't just like there's this fascistic propaganda that I have fallen prey to for almost my entire life. That like Nazi Germany, right? They were actually like, yeah, they were evil and they fucking killed the Jews, but dude, like if you really look at it, like they were on some fucking shit there, bro. Like they were fucking building all kinds of shit way better than other people did it, bro. And like they were running their government like fucking crazy efficiently, bro. It is absolutely, and I know it's gonna be mind blowing. It was very mind blowing to me, but it is absolutely ahistorical that their society was functioning especially efficiently. It was not at all an efficient society. Now, did they have some brilliant scientists? Of course. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything to do with their ethno-nationalist, fascist, fucking authoritarian tendencies. That is a product of their culture was always very engineering based, and if you put a high status on engineering, you're going to have some really good engineers. So it's a very big propaganda thing. And if we're going to move on here at any point, I guess we should now. I could go on with that. Fascism could be a whole video. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going with the labels and the theme here. Now, socialism. I want to ask you, what is socialism? What is your answer? Because if your answer is synonymous with evil, I hate to tell you that you're wrong. Like if I were to take your statement and substitute where you said socialism and put evil in there, and it makes just as much sense as a sentence, then you probably have the wrong definition of what socialism is. So let's get into what the definition of what socialism is. Socialism, a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or relegated by the community as a whole. Now, first off, this is not communism. Now, I didn't write down communism here because I'm not going over it, but this is not communism. What it also isn't is evil. In my opinion, capitalism is evil. The ownership of the means of production is in like 5 hands, and everyone else can go fuck themselves. That's so wrong on so many levels. Socialism is basically, it is a ideology in where we all should be the winners as much as possible. We should build society in a way that elevates the common man, which is everybody, in a way that not only a few can win this game, but if people are willing, that anyone can win. Because as I forgot who said it, but it was an amazing statement. In capitalism, everyone can be successful, right? Or anyone can be successful, but everyone cannot. Fundamentally, because it's a system based on exploitation. You have to sell a product for less than a little bit more than what it's worth, right? You have to sell a product for a little bit more than what it's worth in order to actually have capital and actually make things for selling products. You have to pay employees less than what you should be paying them. Otherwise, you're losing money. Exploitation is built in. In socialism, exploitation is nearly non-existent. Nobody is exploited out of anything when you're providing health care to them because they pay taxes. Nobody's exploited out of anything when they're allowed to learn things on this fucking planet that we're locked into since we're born, which means free education. Now, for those who say, oh, but how are we going to pay for this college that you say good, or this health care? First of all, I mean, a quick, easy response is, how is everyone else paying for it? Because they sure the fuck are. Another response is, how are we going to pay for endless intervention wars overseas? We easily pay for that, $1 trillion a year. You really think it takes $1 trillion of American taxpayer money a year to keep our freedom? Because that's the only argument they have, unless they're going to go with what they're actually doing, which is stealing resources from smaller, less powerful countries. But the argument that they have to try to make it at all a good guy thing is preserve our freedom. That shouldn't cost $1 trillion a year. If it does, then we're not doing it very fucking efficiently. So how are we going to pay for that? How are we going to pay for the socialistic programs? I don't know. How have we been paying for Social Security this whole time? It seems like that's working out just fine. Everybody loves it. No economist is saying that it's putting anything at stress. How have we paid for police officers and firefighters and fucking public roads and libraries and all of these things? How have we paid for those? Parks. It's pretty fucking easy. You allocate the funds there. That's a non-argument. So, on to the point, the broader point. That was how I think people very much so misunderstand political labels, which is dangerous because they use them so often, even though they have no fucking clue what they are. This section is going to be the feelings over facts section, in response to what I think is another very difficult thing to deal with when we're talking about radical right-wingers, Trump supporters, whatever you want to name them. Okay, so here we go. It is very difficult to convince or even talk to someone whom arrived at their entire political philosophy, not by looking into different worldviews and analyzing them and deciding what you think is true or not, but by reacting to different personalities, appearances, aesthetics, and culture war issues that require little to no objective induction of ideas, but rather reactionary, dismissive, opinionated statements of essentialism. No, I wrote that. I didn't steal that from anything. But I couldn't imagine, because that's just my views, a truer statement than that. How do you deal with people? Like I said, how do you convince them, let alone even talk to people who have arrived at their entire ideology not on data and logic and facts and A to B thinking, but really from their feelings about things? What makes them feel good? What makes them feel angry or bad? What they think is cool? What they think is not cool? Like that's their entire political ideology. So what data or argument am I going to give them that will even break through? Certainly not one that's based on logic, because they did not arrive at these conclusions from logic or facts or reasoning. They arrived at these conclusions from their feelings. And when you're attacking somebody's feelings, you're attacking their entire person. You're attacking their entire lived experience on the earth. You're attacking their existence. So, what do we do? What the fuck do we do with that? I have no idea. I'm gonna be, like, that's not for this video. I'm gonna be doing a video on my plan on how to actually get through to people moving forward, what kind of arguments we should be using. I'm gonna have to think about it a lot because it's not an easy one. This video is mainly about what the true problem is left over after the Trump era. I think we should just go ahead and get into conclusions here. In conclusion, Trump supporters who still deny the election results are the real challenge. Donald Trump was the figurehead for this group of people's aggressive anti-intellectualism, anti-equality beliefs, and overall willful ignorance. He was the figurehead for that. He wasn't the movement itself. What still remains isn't Trump, but all these supporters he so carelessly radicalized into their worst impulse version of themselves. We on the left must devise a strategy not based on data, like I was getting into earlier, but on emotion to win them over to sanity. So in my conclusion, I basically freely admit that we're never going to win this battle of ideas with them. They're not playing the game. We are. We have to come up with a whole new fucking game because they're not connected. They're not accepting that the president lost an election. They think that every fucking Democrat is a vampire pedophile. They think all these things, okay? Now, not all of them think these things, but most of these people who are denying this election do. I'm very comfortable saying that. You can't come at somebody like that with a chart, with figures and numbers and data. They literally won't see, hear, read, understand it. Not because they can't understand it, because they won't understand it. They would rather seclude themselves into their feelings of how they feel towards someone like Donald Trump or whoever their favorite right-wing pundits are than they would ever give the light of the day an actual counter-argument to what they think is true. And to me, that's insane, because I love debate. I love debate. And as my channel grows, I hope to debate many people. Because I'm a very empathetic person. And that empathy, by its very nature, allows me to understand somebody else's point of view very well. And I love debates for that. I love understanding and getting into the mindset of somebody who has a completely different worldview than me. And then simultaneously responding to them with what my worldview is with that context. And personally, I don't see a single one of these people either one doing what I just mentioned or ever wanting to. They would much rather seclude themselves into what they like about either the aesthetic or the emotional like charging of how someone like Trump or Alex Jones or any of these people at this point talk and what they say. They would much rather just revolve around that. And that's the biggest thing that we have to tackle here on the left. Is how do we come up with a battle plan when that's the game we're having to play? We're not playing the Dave Rubin free marketplace of ideas. We are playing that, but they have absolutely AFK left the fucking game, dude. Okay, so we're playing it with ourselves at this point. They're not here anymore. We gotta figure out a way, one, to bring them back into that game, because they have willingly left the fucking building. We have to figure out a way to bring them back into that game, and figure out a way to make them think about what they believe. Because I think that if you thought about what you believe, and you truly still like think Trump won, think QAnon is completely real, think everything Alex Jones says is true, if you think about what you fucking believe and you still believe that, then you're crazy. I have no problem saying it. I think you're fucking lunatic. Because if you think about what you believe, you can't come to conclusions based on zero evidence, data, logic, etc. You can't. It just isn't possible. So anyway, it was getting kind of rambly and shit there at the end. I said what I wanted to say. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed watching The Light. Like, comment, subscribe down below, and I'll hit you up with another video tomorrow.